Hello and welcome to Clear as Mud, my YouTube channel dedicated to learning and teaching in academia. My name is Kush Bubber, and I'll be hosting this video. Today's video is part of a series I'm calling The Efficient Professor, and focuses on simple pragmatic tools and techniques which may help save you time. The topic today will focus on the development of a project timeline. I've presented the content in this video on many occasions at both the University of Victoria and Camosun College in Canada as a guest lecturer. Moving on, the learning outcomes of this lecture are as follows. First, a clear understanding of the definition of a project. This is followed by understanding the key attributes of a project plan. We continue by learning a few existing tools and techniques that support the development of your project plan. And finally, working on practicing building your own project plan. The agenda is broken up into 4 categories. The first is discussing the basics of project management, followed by goal setting, project organization, and finally project execution. Project management basics. The first question is, what's a project? The PMI Institute defines a project as a temporary group activity designed to produce a unique product, service, or result. The project is temporary in that it has a defined beginning and end, and therefore has limited scope and resources. A project is unique in that there's a specific set of operations that need to be followed, and the project is based on a singular goal. A fundamental concept in project management is the triple constraint, in that all projects are constrained by some combination of the project budget, of scope, and of time. In understanding the value of project management, it is first instrumental to appreciate multiple approaches in which a project may be executed. For this, I use the following configuration space to describe these approaches metaphorically, with arbitrary points representing the start and project goal. The shortest path between any 2 points is a straight line, and this represents the ideal path to execute a project. Unfortunately, this is typically infeasible for any project of a substantial size. So what's the next best path? How about a bunch of smaller paths that are all aligned perfectly between the start and goal? Again, this is also typically infeasible, but at least it provides multiple checkpoints to evaluate the health of a project. Another model is what I call the bury your head, for which most of us at one point in time have been guilty of doing. In this model, we choose a heading, and we bury ourselves in our work, only to pop out sometime later to realize we are off track. We readjust and do the same. Clearly, this model is highly inefficient and can result in delays to your project. Finally, the last model I will discuss is a systematic model, which uses many small steps with check-ins, concurrent with project management processes. Clearly, the systematic model is superior to the bury your head for complex projects, in that it approximates the ideal project execution model. So what are a few critical elements of a project? First, it's a temporary endeavor with a clear start and end point. The identification of a meaningful goal is critical in establishing the basis for your project. Establishing check-ins via milestones are important in monitoring the health of your project. Generating tasks through clearly articulating the work to be done. And finally, assessing your project execution by monitoring against your plan. Goal setting. As mentioned earlier, the identification of a meaningful goal is critical in establishing the basis for your project. To further understand this, we look at the serial process, which describes the relationship between the problem and the final result. All projects are based on the existence of a problem. Once a problem is recognized, research is conducted to better understand that problem, resulting in the definition of a goal. The goal describes the desired result or outcome, but does not define how that outcome is going to be arrived at. In essence, you may think of a goal as the what, and that the what drives the how. With a goal in place, we work on the task of planning. That plan leads to the definition of a project, for which we may now execute on that project plan, leading to a result. The accuracy of that result to solving our original problem is fundamentally determined on how well we define that goal. We may further understand this by going back to our project configuration space. We note in our project configuration space if our actual goal was located away from the point we converge to, in essence, we'd be doing the wrong thing. So this leads to an important question. How do we define a good goal? One way is to use the SMART goal definition framework. SMART is an acronym which stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. In defining a goal which adheres to these characteristics, we can be confident that our goal is good. An example of a SMART goal is design and deliver a proposal for upgrading the aging playgrounds at the University of Victoria's Family Housing Complex. The request for proposal closes December 9th, 2016. Now that we've defined a SMART goal, we may proceed with building our project timeline. A timeline consists of two key elements. The first are milestones. Milestones define a predicted state of a project and often signify important achievements. They are thus considered an event and do not consume resources. When defining milestones, it is often easiest to define them in reverse order of your intended goal. An example of a milestone is the following. Building drawings have been accepted by the customer and are awaiting sign-off by the consulting engineering firm. This clearly defines a state of the project. The second components are tasks. A task is any piece of work requiring resources to complete. Tasks are defined using action verbs. And an example of a task is the following. Review the BC plumbing code to ensure the drinking water intake piping layout adheres to safety standards. Clearly, the word review is a verb defining an action which needs to be completed. With the definition of the two key components of a timeline in place, we can now define task management as a systematic process of defining, prioritizing, sequencing, and executing tasks in order to achieve a goal. We know milestones help us to define and sequence our tasks, as well as provide a baseline to assess our project execution against our project plan. With the basic definitions in place, we can now define a process we can use to create a timeline. First and foremost, we need to define a goal and hopefully make that goal SMART. Once we've defined our goal, we can work backwards and define our milestones. Once our milestones are in place, we can define tasks. In defining tasks, we brainstorm actions that are required to achieve those milestones. We estimate the amount of time required to complete each task. We determine what resources are required. And when required, we break down complex tasks into simpler tasks. Finally, we create our timeline. We sequence the tasks in chronological order, and we estimate the duration to complete each task. In creating a timeline, a physical activity may be performed using sticky notes in the task management framework discussed in the previous slide. Utilizing the same SMART goal defined earlier, milestones are defined on blue sticky notes, while tasks are defined on yellow sticky notes. On these yellow sticky notes, we identify the duration, how long, and the resource, who is required, for each task. We use action verbs to describe those tasks. An example of both a milestone and a task are shown below. On the left, on blue, we clearly define a milestone as a state of the project, whereas on the right, we define a task by using an action verb, as well as the resources and the duration required to perform the task. Using a flat surface, we can place our milestones in chronological order. Once we establish the chronological location of each milestone, we may then proceed by placing tasks in between those milestones. In this case here, we note milestone 1 represents a specific state of the project, and tasks 2, 3, and 4 executed after milestone 1 is achieved allows us to proceed the project into the state of milestone 2. Through this example, we note that milestones are important in helping us define tasks. Looking at an example, we go back to the goal we defined earlier in this presentation. We first define our milestones in reverse chronological order. So the previous milestone is the detailed design is complete and signed off. Previous to that, we've selected a single conceptual design. And before that, we've performed some research and analyzed the data to define our need and problem statements. Now that we have established our milestones, we work in forward chronological order to define our tasks. Using our first chronological milestone, we may now define tasks which allow us to transition between our initial state, the start, to our first chronological milestone, which is research data gathered and analyzed in order to define our project need and problem statements. Clearly, in order to achieve the first milestone, we need to both research and gather data, as well as analyze that data to form our problem statement. We note in defining these tasks, resources include our internal teammates as well as external members as well as software packages. Moving on, we now define tasks which allow us to transition between our first milestone and the second milestone. In this case, the first task is the brainstorming of several design concepts, and the second is the selection of a single concept. Once again, the same process is followed until we achieve our final goal. With our timeline in place, we turn to executing the project. At this point in time, I usually like to ask a general conceptual question. Now that we have a project plan in place, are we guaranteed to be successful? Hopefully you answered, no. A project may be thought of as a living entity. As such, a plan may be considered merely as a guideline in helping the project evolve. The next stage of the project is executing the activities defined in the plan. In general, no project ever proceeds exactly to plan. As such, there is always a need to monitor the progress of the project and make adjustments accordingly. Several systems exist to track progress of a project. An example of one is KANBAN. KANBAN is a workflow visualization tool with origins from Toyota Japan. It is a systematic methodology for tracking the status of tasks using the same sticky notes you use to define your timeline. States are defined on a board, and tasks, the sticky notes, are moved between these bins based on their status. Trello is an example of a free tool available for easily implementing Kanban. We follow with a quick demo of Trello. In using Trello, we may define the same bins we had in the previous slide. For more sophisticated projects, we can define additional bins. Within each bin, we may define tasks as cards. Within each card, we may define subtasks in the form of a checklist. Within each task, we may define due dates. And then with each task, we may define a specific member who's responsible. We note all the activity is listed in the section below for each task. In addition, we may define specific labels. Once tasks are defined, they may be easily moved between bins. Once moved between bins, we note the activity is logged. In addition, We can subscribe to the card, in which at any point in time, if there's any activity occurring on that card, information will be sent to the individual who subscribed. We may then also, utilizing a power-up, associate the card with a calendar, so that when we go to our calendar view, we can see each task listed in our calendar view, effectively generating a Gantt chart. Moving back to the presentation, we can now summarize this lesson. Projects are a temporary endeavor with a clear desired output described by a goal. That goal may be defined using a SMART framework. Task management requires defining milestones and tasks, as well as sequencing those tasks chronologically. During execution, projects rarely follow the plan perfectly, and hence require tracking. These are the references for this presentation. That's all I have for today. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to be notified when future videos are posted. Thanks again.